We have made it to the 2028 NFL Draft. Another opportunity for our St. Louis Dragons to look to improve our roster in what I feel like is the most pivotal offseason of this series thus far. In the last episode, we had our NFL Draft preview going over every single position group in depth. And in case you missed that episode, I'll leave a card at the top right of the screen for you to go ahead and check out. Going into this draft, the Dragons have 6 picks, 4 of which are in the top 100, including our own picks in the first, second, and third round, along with a late third we got from New England in the Devin White trade. We don't possess many day 3 picks, nothing until the 6th round, but as you guys know, I love moving up and down the draft board, so there's probably going to be multiple trades that we end up making. Our final order of business before we get started. As always, the draft class is up and published on the Draft Class Vault for the PlayStation 5. So if you would like to use this draft, it's called Dragons Draft 5, spelled as it is on screen, all caps. And if you want to use any draft class throughout this series, just type in my PSN, again, spelled as it is on screen, and you can use any of the draft classes that we've had so far in this franchise. All right, let's not waste any more time and let's get this show on the road. The 2028 NFL Draft will now be on the clock. The Tennessee Titans, who won just one game a year ago, will be picking first. And the question is, do they pick a quarterback or do they go in another direction? They have former top 5 pick Otto Askew, but he's not exactly a spring chicken anymore, entering his age 27 season on the last year of his contract. The Titans might be so bad, though, that drafting a quarterback is just putting them in a position to ruin their career development, and I might just want to start fresh with the best non-quarterback on their board. So with the first pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Mapanos Gaspar, edge rusher out of Middle Tennessee State. For the second year in a row, it's a pass rusher going number 1 overall, and Gaspar gets to stay at home going to the Tennessee Titans, coming in as a 78 overall, so not as good as the number 1 pick last year, but still, quite a good player. The Titans need talent. Their roster is lacking severely. They're on their 5th head coach in 6 years. The team is bad. The culture is bad. The structure of the organization is bad. So they figure it probably is not a good idea to thrust a rookie quarterback in there and instead give Otto Askew one more chance. And if it doesn't work, let him go. Grab a quarterback next year, because chances are this team's going to be picking at the top of the draft again. With the second pick, the Minnesota Vikings are now on the clock, and they select Simon Rashid IV, quarterback out of Georgia. Former first-round pick Deontay Harris is out in Minnesota after 4 years, having signed with the Buccaneers this offseason. Minnesota acquired former Seahawks quarterback Bryson Bowen, but only as a Band-Aid rather than as the franchise guy, opting for Rashid, who's only a 74 with normal development. I get that looks a little disappointing, but I think he's got a chance to be a really good player. 6'6", 212 pounds, really good arm talent. He's got the arm strength. Accuracy is really solid across the board. I think he's the best pure passer in this entire draft class and will likely compete with Bowen for the starting job in Week 1. With the third pick, the Cleveland Browns select Amari Adai, edge rusher out of Syracuse. The Browns are going to add another pass rusher to the arsenal. I don't think Cleveland's going to be this bad again. I think their roster and their quarterback are too good. I think Adai's a pretty solid player, maybe not top 3 pick worthy, coming in as a 75 overall with hidden development, but I think him on the other side of Myles Garrett, I think those two could be a pretty good duo. With the fourth pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Erebus Dorlum, wide receiver out of Texas A&M. Many scouts believe that this is the best football player in this entire draft class, and I'm a little bit surprised that he fell out of the top 3. I get it with the Vikings because they picked a quarterback, but I'm a little bit surprised Tennessee passed on him, and with Cleveland's bad receiving group, I'm very surprised that they passed on him. He is 23 years old, which is a little bit on the older side, but he'll come in as an 80 overall. He's 6'4", he's athletic, he's a good route runner, dynamic after the catch. He'll be joining former Dragon receivers Griffin Weaver III and Tykeem Keon Jr. in Tampa Bay, catching passes from the recently signed Deontay Harris. That'll bring us to the Denver Broncos. They pick Zamarion Kingsley, offensive tackle out of Georgia. 2 Georgia players off the board here in the top 5. Kingsley will be coming in as an 80 overall as well. He only has normal development, but the Broncos just got themselves a rock on the offensive line. If you're getting a 10-year starter at tackle, you are not complaining with normal development. With the 6th pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Kevin Hennessy, quarterback, out of the University of Alabama. So the Rams get their new signal caller, and we've got a rookie quarterback entering our division for a second straight year. Hennessy's a 73 with normal development. So in terms of the dev traits, these top 2 quarterbacks in this class both do not have hidden. Nonetheless, I like Hennessy. I think he's got the strongest arm of any quarterback in this class. It's pretty obvious that the Deshaun Watson thing is no longer working out, and they're going to start fresh. We've got a trade here at pick 7. The Bengals will be moving up 7 spots with the Chicago Bears. The Bears were a possible quarterback spot. Both of the top 2 QBs are off the board. And the Bengals will be making our first trade at the draft, giving up their first rounder and second rounder to move up here along with a day 3 swap. And they select Dylan Jesperstad, edge rusher out of Utah. The Bengals knew they needed some high-impact players on the defensive side of the ball, so why not draft a guy who had 13 sacks a year ago? 77 overall, hidden development. Jesperstad wins in all different ways as a pass rusher. And the Eagles here at pick 8, who desperately need edge rushing help, have to be fuming at this revelation. Philadelphia, knowing Howie Roseman, have a backup plan in mind. They'll be sticking with the defensive line, picking Sabbath Katopodis, the defensive tackle out of Clemson. I'm a little bit surprised he went in the top 10. He is a 78 overall, and despite having normal development, he's a well-rounded player across the board, only 21 years old. This is somebody who can be on the field on all 3 downs. He's a good run defender, good pass rusher. So while I'm a little surprised he went this high, this is not a bad pick at all by the Eagles. With the 9th pick, the New York Giants select Adrian Hoker, cornerback out of Indiana. I think when it's all said and done, Hoker will end up being the best defensive player in this draft. 80 overall, hidden development. He is a monster in zone coverage. Really smart player, knows how to read the opposing QB. I don't know if he's ever going to be the best corner in the NFL because he's lacking a little bit in man. He's not the most physical. I don't think you want him on an island with bigger 6'5" receivers, but other than that, he is a stud. Feliciano Devereaux, wide receiver out of Ohio State, goes to the New York Jets. He's a little bit smaller, but he's a really good route runner. He can play on the outside and in the slot, pairing up with another former Ohio State wide receiver in Garrett Wilson. Devereaux is a pretty solid player, 77 overall with hidden development, and he looks well worth being the second receiver off the board. So now we're out of the top 10. The Washington Commanders select Latrell McCoy, offensive tackle out of Clemson. When we looked at the final mock draft, it had McCoy going number 1 to the Tennessee Titans, and that always felt wrong. Like, yeah, McCoy's a good player, and his stock went up quite a bit throughout the season, but he was never in consideration for the number 1 pick. I think 11's a lot more around his range. Vince Rossetti, tackle out of Kentucky, goes to the Buffalo Bills. Really good offensive line class at the top. And so far, we've already seen 3 tackles go off the board here in the top 12, and I think we're going to have a few more, along with a handful of interior offensive linemen off the board in the first round. So Josh Allen gets a new protector at right tackle with Rossetti. That'll bring up the Las Vegas Raiders, who of course drafted a QB in the first round last year. They're going to be moving down, though, with the Minnesota Vikings, who will be giving up picks 30 and 34. Of course, they got this first-round pick in the Justin Jefferson trade package with the New Orleans Saints, and they're going to be using it to move back into the top half of the first round. Are they going to get their new rookie quarterback some help, or possibly look at the defensive side of the ball? With the 13th pick, the Minnesota Vikings will select defensive back Juju Banks out of Tulane. So the Vikings are going to the secondary. They have a pretty big need at corner, and they feel like there is a big drop-off at the position after Juju Banks, and they don't want to wait until pick 30, so they're going to go up and get their guy now. And it's a lot to move up for him, but I think Banks is going to be a really good player, and I think it could be worth it. That'll bring up the Bears here at 14. They moved down from 7. They've seen a handful of good defensive players go off the board, but they'll be more than happy to settle with Alejandro Hernandez out of Florida State. He's kind of a one-trick pony as a pass rusher. He relies on his speed and his get-off off the edge, but I think he's got a good swim move and a solid bull rush that is being worked on, and I think he can become a multi-dimensional pass rusher in the near future. With the 15th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Pop Armstrong, edge rusher out of Florida State. The pass rushers are now starting to fly off the board. Armstrong's only a 71 overall. There's really no power element to his game. He completely relies on his finesse, and I think he's raw, but the Colts have a high track record of developing edge rushers. Cowan Nastert goes to the Texans. Former Ohio State left tackle would be the new left tackle for C.J. Stroud, as Laramie Tunsil is, of course, gone now with the Colts. Ako Mako, edge rusher out of Washington to the Packers. The last few picks have almost been exclusively edge rushers and offensive tackles. These teams are really focused on building through the trenches, which has obviously been the key for our St. Louis Dragons in the offseason. These two position groups you'd think we'd be heavily looking at, and players are flying off the board. Nose tackle, Elliott Sy goes to the 49ers. Luckily for us, he's only a 69 overall. Nonetheless, I think he could be a solid run-stuffing, gap-clogging defensive tackle, but overall he does look pretty underwhelming. Man, I'm so sad. Our division rival drafts what appears to be a bust. With the 18th pick, the Lions will be moving down 6 spots with the Kansas City Chiefs. They'll be sending away their 3rd-round pick to Detroit, along with a day 3 swap. So what could the Chiefs be looking to move up for here towards the middle of the 1st round at 19th overall? And ultimately, they are going to stick with the trend of trench players picking Killian Kennedy, the offensive tackle out of Oregon. He as well is really raw, only a 68 overall. But he has hidden development, and the Chiefs are going to look to develop him, make sure the offensive line is still good for the second half of Patrick Mahomes' career. The Los Angeles Chargers are now on the board here at pick 20. We're getting really close to our pick, only a few away. And they pick Omoe Kaya Okamale, the edge rusher out of UCLA. He was definitely a guy we were looking at. I really like what he provides in run defense. I think he's going to be a good pass rusher as well. I think other than Juju Banks, probably 9 of the last 10 picks have been either pass rushers or offensive linemen. I mean, this run will not stop. That'll bring us to the Seattle Seahawks, and they select center Benjamin Dover out of Ohio State, who is an 83 overall and is already the 4th ranked center in the entire league. So the Seahawks are getting a monster with Benjamin Dover, who I think is going to be able to bend over and play center at a really high level, clearly, being that he's one of the top 5 in the game. Bobo Ray, another edge rusher, and another Georgia Bulldog off the board, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars as they look to get somebody who they can pair up with another former Georgia edge rusher in Trayvon Walker. That'll bring us to the St. Louis Dragons here at 23. The last 10 picks have all pretty much exclusively been pass rushers and offensive linemen, which obviously are 2 of the spots that we've really focused on in this offseason. There are still a lot of good players left on the board, multiple of whom I would feel good with here at pick 23. So because of that, it doesn't hurt to see what's going on the phone, and we're going to check out some of these trade offers. Most of these deals involved future firsts, some of which involve future firsts and future seconds, which I don't know why the other team would do that. I think this trade from New England would be pretty interesting, moving down 6 spots, acquiring a 3rd. That Ravens deal looks interesting too, moving down just 2 spots, acquiring a pair of day 3 picks. I think this looks like a really good move for us. We're going to still pick very soon at number 25, and we're going to add a 4th rounder and a 7th rounder, doubling our day 3 draft picks. So with that, the Baltimore Ravens are now on the clock, and they will select Iggy Maddox, wide receiver out of Colorado State. This trade is going to end up being a win-win for both sides because Iggy Maddox is a beast. 79 overall, hidden development. Spoiler alert, his development trait starts with the letter X. This dude is nasty. His stock has risen throughout the season. He makes his way into the 1st round as the 3rd receiver off the board. And in terms of value, this is a total steal for the Baltimore Ravens. The Detroit Lions select Chukwuemeka Minky, the defensive tackle out of Iowa State. The Lions are easily one of the biggest winners of the 1st round. They move back, and they still get a monster to pair up with Aiden Hutchinson and Chase Young on the defensive line. Our target is still on the board here at 25, although I will say both of the guys who just went were our backup plans, and both of them clearly were pretty good backup plans. Nonetheless, the guy I've been wanting is still there. We're going to call the phones again, but realistically, I'm not sure how much longer he's going to last, and with our backup options off the board, I don't want to risk it. Now, interestingly, New England's offering is pretty much the exact same trade, and I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't tempted, but we're going to stick and pick. I don't want to risk this player falling. So now the question is, who is the apple to the Dragons' eye? With the 25th pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Zion Creed, edge rusher out of the University of Michigan. So the Dragons bolstering the pass rush, adding another body to the front four. And for the second straight year, the Dragons will be picking a Michigan defensive player in the first round. Last year it was Ryan Nada. This time it's Zion Creed, who's going to come in with hidden development. We really focused on the offensive line in free agency. Now we're going to focus on adding a long-term edge piece to pair up with Simeon Bonnet. I really like what Zion Creed brings to the table. He wins with power. He wins with his quickness. And he's good in the run game. I think he's a pretty solid all-around athlete. But the reason why we're drafting him here is because of his polish as a defensive lineman, as an edge rusher, as somebody who can really set the edge and go after the quarterback, but also be productive in the ground game. I think the floor with Zion is going to be really high, and he's going to be able to play quite a bit as a rookie. He's only a 74 overall, but I feel like that doesn't really do him justice. At 6'5", 281 pounds, he really is the perfect build for us in our 4-3 scheme. The block shedding and power moves are very solid for a rookie. He plays with a relentless motor and gives no plays off. Going into the draft, he was the guy I was planning on picking in the first round, and sure enough, it's exactly what happens. Let's round out round number 1 as the Panthers select Justin Harris Jr., left tackle out of LSU, getting another protector for their talented quarterback Bryce Young, who of course just received a big extension, assuming Carolina is going to be one of the best teams in the NFC for a long time. The Tennessee Titans, with their second first-rounder, go with Shakur Wilkins out of Colorado. The Titans clearly want to build something here up front. They signed Derek Brown, they draft Mapanos Gaspar, and now they draft Shakur Wilkins. They recognize that it starts up front, and they want this defensive line to be relentless. That'll bring it the Dallas Cowboys here at pick 28. They go with Riker Hubbard, guard, out of Miami. Another offensive lineman is off the board. Hubbard, the first guard selected this year. This is somebody who I think is really athletic, and he has great power coming in as a 78 overall. And I think he'll be able to start right away for the Cowboys, who may be looking to move Tyler Smith outside with the loss of Sharif Sully, who obviously signed with us. Jaden Story goes to the New England Patriots, another blocker for Mac Jones and company. He seems happy to be here with a temporary boost of +3. The Las Vegas Raiders select Shadon Hazelwood, edge rusher out of South Florida. So the Raiders are going to add another pass rusher to the arsenal. Their pass rush was one of the lesser units in the league this past year, and they're trying to get some help with Max Crosby and Tyree Wilson. The New York Giants at pick 31 will not be picking here. They are going to be moving down. They got this pick in the Dexter Lawrence deal last year, and it's the Bears who will be moving up, giving away a second and a third. Obviously, the Bears moved down already. They acquired an extra second, and they're going to use their own second to move up for quarterback Aristotle Clase Blanco out of Colorado. The Bears have Justin Fields, who is what he is, but I think Chicago recognizes that they want to get somebody behind him to develop. Clase Blanco's got a ways to go, but if he sits for a few years, he could be pretty good. Sullivan Obsidian, wide receiver out of Kansas State, will go to the defending Super Bowl champion Miami Dolphins. He's not the fastest, but he's quick, and I think he's got good hands and will be a solid pairing with Jalen Waddle and Oliver Tripp. So that'll wrap up the first round. Mapanos Gaspar out of Middle Tennessee State goes number 1. 3 quarterbacks off the board, with Simone Rashid going to the Vikings, Kevin Hennessy to the Rams, and the Bears picking Aristotle Clase Blanco. As for our St. Louis Dragons, we end up moving down just 2 spots, selecting Zion Creed, the edge rusher out of Michigan, adding some additional day 3 selections, and we've still got 3 more picks in the top 100. The question is, do the Dragons look to move up even more? There's a lot of receivers and a lot of talented defensive players on the board. 2 spots that the Dragons could certainly look to add to. Obviously, now that we're out of the first round, we're going to be moving a lot quicker, not going through every pick in depth, but we will certainly talk about the notable ones. Reynard Recco, the edge rusher out of Auburn, goes to the Titans, again building the defensive line. The Raiders add Hollister, a guard. Desarion Sowell, corner out of Wake Forest, to the Browns. Vince Ferguson, the first running back off the board, joins the Bucs. They want as many weapons around Deontay Harris as possible. The Denver Broncos select Neville Ronan, safety out of Michigan State. The Rams get Boubacar Barry, wide receiver out of Georgia. Really good pick here for the Rams. He's a 78 overall. Coming into the year, he looked like the second projected receiver in this class, but he did not test very well athletically. He ran a 40-yard dash in the mid-4.5s, slips into the second round. Speed isn't everything, though. And Gavin Hennessy is a new really good playmaker. Jerron Bullingham to the Giants. Arantino Casablanco to the Eagles. And the Giants again pick a quarterback. Alessio Armanda out of TCU. And first and foremost, he's only a 67 overall, so this is kind of a reach. But I don't really get this pick for the Giants. They have Stanley Cubbage Jr., who they drafted in the first round a couple years ago. Why pick a QB in the second? Keenan Sullivan, running back, goes to the Lions. Olu Adensaya to the Commanders. Sherman Poodles, really talented corner, goes to the Bills. Harrison Hayward Jr. to the Raiders. Keephon Branch to the Bears. A lot of defensive backs going off the board. Adonis Bazzana to the Colts. Angel Sinclair to the Texans. Isaac Artest to the Packers. Aiden Romeo to the Niners, big-time weapon. Armani Brown to the Lions. Imani Mercedes to the Chargers. Johnny Green, edge rusher out of Virginia Tech, to the Seahawks. This guy is really good. His development is superstar X Factor. The second consecutive year that the Seahawks have drafted an X Factor player outside of the first round, no less. Hambone Akins, defensive tackle out of West Virginia, goes to the Jaguars. And that'll bring us here to the St. Louis Dragons with the 23rd pick in the second round. 55th overall. A lot of receivers, a lot of defensive backs still on the board. Is that where the Dragons are going to go? Or will they look at another direction? With the 55th pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Mason Rosenberg, guard, Alabama. So the Dragons are addressing the offensive line. We signed 3 potential offensive line starters in free agency, but we're not done. We know we've got to get some more guys up front, and I think Mason Rosenberg from the University of Alabama could be the perfect fit. I love his athleticism and his versatility. He's got experience at guard and center at college, and he will likely compete for starting spots at both right guard and center. And I would suspect that he'll be the favorite to land the starting center job. In the run game, he is a mauler, and he clearly enjoys run blocking and powering through dudes. I like his footwork in the passing game. I think he's a pretty solid pass protector as well. As a pull blocker, he moves really well. And again, his versatility and his athleticism are both going to be huge pluses for this team because we'll be able to play him pretty much wherever we want. He comes in as a 79 with hidden development. One of the best football players in this entire draft, but he was undervalued a little bit because he plays guard in what looks like a really good interior offensive line class. But nonetheless, this guy is a beast. He's going to be a top half of the league guard immediately and possibly a top 10 center if that's where we choose to play him. So I'm not sure where he's going to start, but I think he's going to be too good to come off the field. And man, we just drafted a total stud with Mason Rosenberg, who's going to be a big-time piece for the offensive line going forward. And we might now have 4 new starters on the O-line. We wanted to commit to building around Puma Whitlock, and so far we've done a great job of that this offseason. Marquez Johnson goes to the Eagles. Charlie Davenport, quarterback out of UCLA, to the Ravens. Okay, odd spot. They have Lamar Jackson, whose starting spot I feel like is in no danger. I think they wanted a player who is similar enough to Lamar Jackson as a backup. They had Will Levis, who I thought is a pretty good backup. And Levis, if you remember, single-handedly is the reason why the Ravens didn't lose to us this past year, but instead tied. When Lamar got hurt, Levis saved them. Liam Travers, the two-way player, goes to the Panthers, staying home. Deshaun Dayton to the Steelers. KJ Bowman to the Dallas Cowboys. The New England Patriots here with just a few picks to go in round 2. Get Jupiter Reynaldo, 2 tackles to start for New England. Arkel Griffin to the Vikings, wide receiver out of Georgia. This is a fun pick because their quarterback, Simone Rashid, played at Georgia. So the Bulldog connection is reunited for the Vikings. Caitlin Brown goes to the Falcons, and the Dolphins select Keontae Bentley Pajian. So that'll wrap up the second round. Overall, a pretty big win. We drafted the tied for highest rated player in the round with 79 overall, Mason Rosenberg, who looks like a total monster. We've drafted 2 really good linemen so far. And as I said, we are committed to building through the trenches. We did it in free agency. Now we're doing it in the draft. We've got 2 picks in day 3. A lot of receivers on the board. I think this is the position where we're going to see an early run. There's probably going to be close to 8 or 9 receivers at least who I think get picked here in the 3rd round. The question is when the first ones will go. Not to the Titans. They get safety Jonathan Bowie out of North Carolina. The Vikings doubling down on receivers. They pick Marcus Archer out of Oregon. Nicholas McDevitt to the Browns. Luke Henley to the Bucks. The Broncos get Coco Reyna, running back out of Miami. I think him and Javonte Williams have very different skill sets, and they'll be able to complement each other very well. And eventually, I think Coco Reyna is going to overtake Javonte as the guy in Denver. Daquan Dumas, wide receiver to the Saints. Here come the receivers, folks. Taj Tompkins to the Bears. Traylon Marshall to the Eagles. I really like Marshall. I thought about trading up for him pretty soon, and I'm really surprised he fell this far. I get that we don't really need edge rusher anymore, but I feel like he's a really good player. He only came in as a 71 overall, though, so I guess it kind of worked out that we didn't. 3 consecutive guards going back to back to back. Eric Jordan goes to the Bucks. Ford Pryor, wide receiver, goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. There's another receiver. The Raiders' receiving core is without a doubt the worst in the league. I think they're going to need to draft a couple of more. Zachary Florence, tight end, goes to the Colts, adding another weapon for their offense. Trevor Harvey to the Packers. Theo Witherspoon to the Niners. San Francisco doubling down on fast, big, white receivers. They picked Aiden Romeo in the second round, and now Theo Witherspoon with 95 speed. He ran a 4.3. Here in the third round, they are committed to giving Brock Purdy more weapons. Jumani Coors on the last year of his deal, and Deebo Samuel is not getting any younger. Rocky Sanders to the Lions, Chase Gentry to the Chargers, Bo Hotokali to the Seahawks, and Chevron Vamos to the Eagles. That'll bring up the Dragons, who have 2 of the next, I think, 6 or 7 picks at this point. Here in the third round, still plenty of pass catchers on the board. There's also a number of linebackers still here, along with some corners. Let's see which route the Dragons choose to go with here in the third round. With the 87th pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Wilson Voafana, tight end out of the University of South Florida. So the Dragons are picking a tight end. I've wanted to pick a tight end semi-early for a while. We did pick Gift Aaron Jr. in the 6th round last year, but that's the only time we've drafted a tight end in this series so far until now. I really like Wilson Voafana's skill set. 6'6", 232 pounds. Wouldn't mind to see him gain some more weight and add some strength, but he is a real vertical threat. This is somebody who can stretch the field as a receiver. As a blocker, I think he's pretty solid. In the short passing game, I think he's pretty good too, but his ability to go vertical is really what separates him from some of the other tight ends in this class. And with his size, he can go up and get it. He's got great body control for somebody who's 6'6". And I think him and Isaiah Likely can complement each other very well. Likely's also not getting any younger. He's only got 2 years left on his deal. He's entering his 7th NFL season. So we've got to be prepared for life after Isaiah Likely, and that could be headlined by Wilson Voafana. I think we're going to run more 12 personnel next year, which means 2 tight ends on the field, and we might have Voafana line up at fullback sometimes as well. So the Dragons add a pass catcher. Speaking of receivers, Nate Ware Jr. out of Buffalo is the very next pick to the Lions. And truthfully, this was my next target. Going into the third round, I was planning on picking Voafana and Ware. The reason why I picked Voafana first is because I thought it was more likely he would be picked before our next pick as opposed to Nate Ware Jr. Clearly, I was wrong, and he ends up going to the Lions. I wanted to add a big-bodied perimeter threat to the outside, and I think that's exactly what Nate Ware is going to be for the Lions. The Baltimore Ravens get Kyler Bush, linebacker from Alabama. Andrew McClendon to the Giants. Damian Memphis, out of Memphis, stays in Tennessee. He's going to the Titans. And then one more team ahead of us. It's the Denver Broncos, and they will select Mason Heaven, center out of Texas A&M. So the Dragons are back on the board. Our target, Nate Ware Jr., is gone. Is our backup plan another receiver or a different position? With the 29th pick of the third round, 93rd overall, the St. Louis Dragons select Jalen Mallard, wide receiver out of BYU. So the Dragons will still be going with a pass catcher. Jalen Mallard, ironically, is bigger than Nate Ware, 6'3", 217, and unlike Ware, he has hidden development. So the Lions stealing Nate Ware from us might end up being a blessing in disguise because Jalen Mallard might be the better player. I don't think he plays as big as Nate Ware. I don't think he's as good in one-on-one contested catch situations, which was the type of guy I was looking for. But this is a vertical threat who can stretch the field. He is a really good deep route runner, and he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. I think we're going to use him quite a bit out of the backfield at running back because we've got 4 really good receivers as is. 3 of those guys are on the final years of their contracts. So I think Mallard very well could be a long-term starter for us on the outside. But if nothing else, we're going to find ways to manufacture touches for this kid because he is a weapon. At 6'3", he's the biggest wide receiver we now have on the roster. And I think his size and his ability after the catch is going to be a big asset for us coming in as a 72 overall. I think the one weakness with him is his route running, really within 25 yards. He's not a great short route runner. He's completely useless in the intermediate game. He doesn't really have many routes to his route tree. He just knows how to run streak routes down the field, and boy, he is good at that. But other than that, he's got a ways to go. Nonetheless, we're going to find ways to get him the football because he is a weapon. Rounding out the 3rd round, Rigby Remington, tight end, goes to the Seahawks. Mordecai Quiver, quarterback out of South Florida, the Falcons. And Jalen Walker, a corner, to the Dolphins. So the Dragons, with their 2 third-round picks, choose to stand pat with both, doubling up on pass catchers, selecting tight end Wilson Villafana and wide receiver Jalen Mallard. Puma Whitlock is not going to have excuses next year. He's got 4 new starters on the offensive line. He's got 3 new receivers to pair up with the great receivers he already has. And with that, we will move into day 3. We've got 4 day 3 picks, including one coming up pretty early in the 4th round, thanks to our trade with the Baltimore Ravens. The 4th rounder is originally from the Las Vegas Raiders, the 13th pick in round 4, 109 overall. Armand Hammer was one of my top guys on the board here in day 3, goes to the Titans. Meatball Williams to the Vikings. He is built like a literal meatball, living up to his name. Yosufa Ayasatu to the Rams, running back. I think he could be their long-term starter. Nick Chubb is obviously getting quite old. Pop McKenzie to the Eagles. Ja'Kai Exenor to the Giants. He is superstar X-Factor, a steal here in the 4th round. Jack Reed to the Niners. And then just with one more pick left to go, it's Yan-Ye Her, an edge rusher out of Cal, going to the Bills. So that'll bring us here to the Dragons, the 13th pick in the 4th round, 109 overall. Where will the Dragons go here? I was originally planning on trading down, but there's actually a few players I like. We're going to stick and pick. With the 109th pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select DeMar Knight, safety out of Middle Tennessee State University. So the Dragons are going to the secondary, adding DeMar Knight. I think there's a few safeties who could go within the next 10 to 15 picks, and after that, there's a big drop-off. We need safety depth really badly, so I wanted to make sure we could get our guy now. It's ironic because we've picked a safety within the first 2 rounds in 3 drafts in a row. But with Ryan Nada's full-time move to linebacker, we only have 2 safeties on the roster. Because of that, I think DeMar Knight could play quite a bit as a rookie. He's listed as a free safety, but I think he can play anywhere in the secondary. He can play back deep. He can play closer to the box. I think he can play slot corner. I like what he provides in zone coverage. He's a tough, physical, bruising player. I think he's pretty good in man coverage as well when he's lined in the slot, grabbing running backs, tight ends, and slot receivers. And I think he's good enough in run support as well. Not to mention he's a pretty solid all-around athlete coming in as a 71 overall. He's an experienced 4-year starter for Middle Tennessee State. He's played a ton of college football, and I think his experience will be valuable for us in the secondary as our 3rd safety, and a guy who could play quite a bit, especially with injuries in the back end. So DeMar Knight is our 4th round pick. We don't currently have any picks until the 6th, but spoiler alert, we're looking to move up at some point because there are a few players who we like quite a bit who are going to go well before round 6. Tyreek Monday, the edge rusher out of Florida, was the other guy I was looking at with this last pick, but we don't need pass rush. With the pick of Zion Creed in the 1st round, we need safety depth more. Romello Jackson to the Chargers. Nolan Risk to the Saints. A lot of really good day 3 edge rushers. I will say the value is certainly there. Patalomayo Malawalu Jr., running back out of Georgia, to the Kansas City Chiefs. This Georgia offense was so loaded, and you can tell by the amount of players that they're getting drafted here. Now nearing the end of the 4th round, Richie Kirby to the New England Patriots. The Saints get Kalimbo, another edge rusher. Darrell Memphis goes to the Giants. And Makoa Akana, the left-handed quarterback out of Hawaii, goes to, ironically, the Miami Dolphins, who also have a Hawaiian-born left-handed quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, who will get to groom Akana. Obviously, he's not chasing Tua's starting job. The Dolphins just won the Super Bowl. But as a 74 overall, Akana's just as good as the quarterbacks who went in the 1st round. So that'll wrap up round 4. The Dragons, again, sticking and picking, adding DeMar Knight, a talented safety. And that'll bring us into the 5th round. The Dragons, of course, do not have a pick in the 5th round, but as I said earlier, I would expect that to change and possibly look for the Dragons to package some of their 3 picks they have remaining, along with potentially future picks, to move up and get a target they like. Captain Oski starts off the 5th to the Tennessee Titans, who have drafted about 7 defensive linemen, it feels like, today. A lot of linebackers going off the board. Tim Waters, a safety out of Michigan, to the Rams. I think he's a good player. I contemplated him earlier. Xavier Abubakar, a 6'4" corner, off the board to the Eagles. Amel Asisapa, the tackle out of Virginia Tech, goes to the Jets. Darion Turner, tight end out of UConn, I think could be a steal with the Commanders. And then here you go. Here's your trade. The Dragons will be using their next 2 picks, 185 and 213, to move up into the 5th round with the Tennessee Titans. With the 140th pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select Srijan Bazar, defensive tackle out of Clemson. I get that it says he's projected to go undrafted, and I quite frankly do not give a damn. I think Srijan Bazar is a total gem and a player that I really did not want to miss out on, and the fact that he has hit in development completely ratifies that. Bazar is someone who I think has a really high ceiling, and for the 5th round, it's absolutely worth a flyer. Now, I will say he provides pretty much nothing in the run game. He will not be on the field on early downs for a long time, but as a pass rusher, I think the upside's there. Whether he's lined up as a defensive tackle or as a 4-3 defensive end, I think he'll be able to do both in our scheme, and with his power and quickness that he's able to win with, I think he could end up being a really good player. We've tried developing day 3 defensive linemen such as DeJuan Overton, Orlin Babylon, and Trajan Blyshenden, and we haven't necessarily gotten lucky. However, I don't think any of those players have the ceiling that Srijan Bazar has, and I think teams just completely overlooked him. And I think with his upside, he belonged probably somewhere on day 2. I'm not sure how much he's going to play this year because he's quite raw, but I think the ceiling with him is really, really high, and I think taking this shot will be worth the 2 day 3 picks that we moved in order to go up and get him. So Srijan Bazar is the next pick here for the St. Louis Dragons, adding another piece up front. We've really focused on the edge rushing group this offseason, but not so much the interior of the defensive line until now. With that, we only have 1 pick to go, late in the 7th. That doesn't mean we might not move up again, who knows? But for now, our final pick is not for another 2 rounds, so I guess we're going to sit here and wait. The final draftable safeties are coming off the board. Dorian Cooper to the Chiefs, Benji Alvarado to the Carolina Panthers, Leonard Masaki, quarterback out of Temple, goes to the Bengals. Just a couple picks left to go here in round 5, and we are actually on the phones. There's a player who I wasn't really targeting, but I felt like should have gone in like the 4th round, who I now kind of want, who we're going to go up and try to get. I'm going to offer the Falcons our lone 7th rounder and a future 6th. They say no. I offered the exact same deal here to the Miami Dolphins with the final pick in the 5th round, and they again said no. Although I think depending on the team, if somebody really needs an influx of day 3 picks, I think this could really work. So hopefully that ends up being pretty soon as they select Marty Henry, the slot receiver out of Kansas. And that'll wrap up the 5th round. The Dragons, who originally did not have a 5th rounder, move up for Clemson defensive tackle Srijan Bazar, and it appears that the Dragons are looking to move up again for their final target, a player who they feel like should have gone off the board a while ago. And we'll see if somebody here early in the 6th is able to agree to a deal with us, or if our target finally goes off the board like he probably should have 2 rounds ago. We offered the same deal to the Packers. They said no. We offered the same deal to the Saints, and I think this deal actually makes a lot of sense for them. They have 3 picks next year, one of which is outside of the 2nd round. So I think they're going to want more day 3 picks over the next couple of years, and a trade like this makes a lot of sense for them. Instead of getting 1 lottery pick, you get 2. The thing is, I think this lottery ticket is going to be really worth it. With the 182nd pick in the 2028 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Dragons select S.A. Fortis, cornerback out of the University of Cincinnati. This wasn't necessarily a guy I really had on my radar going into the draft for the Dragons. I assumed he was going to go probably in the 4th round, but he's fallen here to round 6, and I don't really know why. So we're going to scoop him up, and he will be our final pick, bearing another trade, perhaps? Who knows? We've already made 2 surprising trade-ups. I like S.C. Fortes' skill set a lot. To me, he is pretty much a direct clone of Demore Diggins, coming out of Oklahoma 4 years ago. His ball skills are elite. 7 interceptions this year at the University of Cincinnati. He can play on the outside, but I think he's going to get his most amount of reps in the slot. He doesn't do well with overly big physical receivers, but he does well with smaller, twitchier guys who generally line up in the slot. I think Fortis is a guy who very well could be the long-term replacement for DeBoer Diggins at slot corner, and while we signed Diggins to a 2-year extension, 2 years is going to be up sooner rather than later. Fortis ends up being a 74 overall. What a steal. So he ends up having the exact same overall rating as the guy we picked in the first round. So a steal for the Dragons, who clearly identified correctly that this is a player worth moving up for. And with that, we are out of picks. So after a pair of trade-ups, we do not have any more picks in this year's draft. We unfortunately are not going to make another wacky trade-up. And with that, our day is done. So because of that, we're going to go through these last few rounds pretty quickly. One of the early picks in the 6th round, running back Nicolo Santiago, is an 80 overall going to the Buccaneers, who drafted the top running back in the class, Vince Ferguson, in the 2nd round. Well, Santiago's better than him and may take the day 1 starting job. That Buccaneers offense looks like a lot of fun. And then into the 7th round, we did not have any picks here. We had a couple coming into the day, but ultimately ended up trading all of those away. The Mr. Irrelevant pick, of course, belonged to the Super Bowl champion Miami Dolphins, who ended up selecting defensive back out of Temple, Lamar Sims. And with that, the 2028 NFL Draft is in the books. And I feel like this worked out really well for us. We were able to get our top targets, Zion Creed and Mason Rosenberg. We added some weapons, we added some defensive linemen, we added depth in the secondary, and we filled out our one final hole on the offensive line. I feel like this offseason really could not have gone a whole lot better for us, and we knew it was a super pivotal offseason coming into it. I think our defensive line and our offensive line are both going to be so much better next year, which is important because as we take a look at our schedule this year is a gauntlet. We obviously have to play the NFC West. We have a first-place schedule, being that we won the division. We have to play the AFC East, who has 2 or 3 really good teams. We have to play the NFC South, which is the best division in the NFL. We have like one easy game this year. We start on the road, week 1, against the reigning number 1 seed Dallas Cowboys. Then week 2, we've got Carolina, one of the best teams in the NFC. Then we've got 4 consecutive divisional games. The Rams, the Seahawks, the Rams again, and the Niners. The latter 3 are on the road. Then after our bye week, we get to play Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in back-to-back weeks. That is a brutal 9-game stretch. But then we get reigning NFC North champion Detroit. New England's one of the best teams in the league. New Orleans nearly made the Super Bowl. The Buccaneers might be a little easier, but they now have a loaded offense. Atlanta's great. The Jets are no slouch. The Dolphins just won the Super Bowl. And then we wrap up with Seattle and San Francisco. That schedule is brutal. So we are certainly going to be tested early and often in this season. No easy games. This has to be the hardest schedule I think I've ever seen. So boy, are we in for a fun and challenging Season 6. And that'll wrap up today's episode. Next time around, we'll go through the preseason and we will play our Week 1 game against the Dallas Cowboys. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.